What are the odds I can hold this stack up without it all falling? I read and DNF'd a ton of books in the month of February. This doesn't even include a few books I don't have physical copies for. So just to give you an idea, these are the books I'm going to talk about, plus a few more. Hey, I did it! So the month of February was an interesting reading month. As you'll notice from this video, I gave quite a few books 5 stars, loved them. Also quit a lot of books, just wasn't feeling them. So it's a little bit of both extremes throughout the month here. And I got a lot of pages read thanks to a lot of cleaning, getting my house ready for moving. And in case you guys missed my notice in the community tab, for the month of March, I'm going to be just sharing one video a week here. So I would really appreciate it if you guys are watching this video, which obviously you are if you're hearing this. I would really appreciate it if you would like the video. I never really ask for you to like a video or ask for you to subscribe, but there's a lot of stuff going on with getting our house ready to move this month that I won't have time to post as much here. So if you guys could like the videos that I put out, if you like them of course, which I assume you probably do if you're watching them. And if you aren't subscribed, if you could subscribe, if you could share my channel with fellow reader friends, that would really help me out this month because I don't have as much time to put here, but I really appreciate this community. And if you guys do want more from me, my Patreon always gets exclusive videos each month, so that is always an option as well. Plus you get like the backlog of years worth of exclusive videos as well. So what I did in February, like I have been doing for the last number of months, is I filmed kind of like weekly-ish wrap-ups and have compiled it all for you in this video. So we will now head to my wrap-ups. Hey guys, so I guess I'm here for my first reading wrap-up of the month. We are on the 8th and I've only finished 3 books, but I have a bunch of big books that I'm reading kind of throughout the month. So I feel like by the end of the month, things will even out, but each week, for the first few weeks, it will feel like I'm not reading a bunch. Oddly, the 3 books that I finished are all fantasy. I mean, I know that I've been in a fantasy phase, but that's weird. Normally I pick up different genres. So let's start with the first book that I finished this month. And, oh, I finished 4 books. I forgot about one, it's an ebook. I'll try to remember to talk about it. The first one I finished is Mortal Queens by Victoria McCombs. This one just came out on February 6th. I got a advanced reader's copy, so I got to start it early and I thoroughly enjoyed this. I gave this one 5 stars. So this is going to be a duology. It is the Fae Dynasty duology, and this is in a world where the human world has a bunch of different islands. There's like the center island where our main character Thea is from, and every year a girl from the center island gets chosen to be the next mortal queen of the Fae. So a couple Fae come out each year and they pick a name out of a hat, not really a hat, but they pick out a name and that girl is their next queen. And at the beginning of the book, Thea, her name gets picked. And I won't say a whole lot more. There is a lot of like trickery, I guess I will say. The Fae are very well known for that kind of thing. And so at the beginning of the book, she has to think of like making alliances and making sure people aren't tricking her. And it sounds quite political, but I generally don't enjoy a whole lot of political stuff going on in the background, and I enjoyed this so much. So I highly recommend this, and I'm already waiting for book 2 to come out. This one was so good. Okay, I'm gonna talk about my ebook next because if I don't, I'm going to forget about it. So I read The Labors of Hercules Beal. This is a middle grade book by Gary D. Schmidt. My daughter requested that I read it, so I got the ebook out from the library. And if you've read his Wednesday Wars or Okay for Now, It's in the same vein. We actually follow some of the same characters, but like when they're older. So our main character, Hercules Beal, his parents died in a car accident a year and a half before the book takes place, and he ends up going to a new school, and his teacher gives him an assignment to read up on the 12 labors of Hercules, and then he also has to kind of perform similar feats in his life. And so that's what the book is about. And Gary D. Schmidt does a good job of having like a sense of humor, but going really deep and making a person tear up. I really enjoyed it. This one, so I read the ebook, and I've always done his books on audio before, so I would be curious to try it again in audio because I think that even ups the experience with his books. But I really did enjoy it. The next fantasy book I finished, I was listening to on audio, and that is The Alloy of Law by Brandon Sanderson. So this is the first book in the Mistborn Era 2 series. So in Mistborn, many people have powers that have to do with metals. So you can ingest certain metals and it helps you do certain things. You can like push off of certain metals depending on what your power is. So our main character in here is a guy named Wax, or Waxilium. He is originally upper class, but he spent many years out in the roughs being a lawman, and for various reasons he has to come back to his like home and run the place, but he still has that pull to try to help out the law in the area. It was fun. It was very different. Like, I've never really read any westerns, so this Mistborn Era 2 is set in the Wild West, which is interesting. And when you think about having powers that have to do with metal, but there's like, back then there was like a lot of different guns, and so that kind of all comes into play. I enjoyed it. The narrator is the same as Michael Kramer, and he narrated the Stormlight Archive. So at first I had a moment where I was like he does really good with the voices, but in my head I was like, oh, but I'm in Mistborn, like I'm in a different series. So that kind of messed with my head a little bit at the beginning. And the one thing that was kind of missing from here is there are some female characters as well, but I find that Sanderson writes female characters so very well, and I wanted more of that in here. So there is this woman that we kind of follow a bit, if we get a bit of it, but I feel like he does such a good job of writing strong female characters that don't feel like they have to be better than the men. There's one scene in here where one of the characters is like, oh, to this woman, you could, you know, wear trousers and go be a lawman too. And she's like, but I like dresses. Like, I like to be interested in law, but I also like to be a female. And I really appreciated that. I'm so sick of books that are overly feminist, that are always like, oh, the woman is better than the man, and like keep drilling it, and like I'm so sick of hearing it. Like, I want to see strong women. I don't want to just hear that they're strong. So he does a really good job with that. And then yesterday, I'm currently working on like pretty much repainting most of my basement. Yesterday I listened to House of Salt and Sorrows while I painted for hours on end, hence why my fingernails they're still full of paint. So this is interestingly enough, I realized at the end, where did it say? On the back? I think it's a preview for the second book. It talks about how it's a fantasy thriller, and I was like, oh, that's what this is. It felt slightly different than fantasy, so it's a retelling kind of the 12 Dancing Princesses, but like much more than that. But it does have some thriller elements. So our main character is Anna Lee. She is one of 12 daughters, and her sisters are slowly dying off one by one, and she's trying to figure out what's going on. She figures maybe some of them were natural, but she's a little bit worried at least the last one was a murder, and so she's digging into it. And meanwhile, there's a lot of other stuff going on. So their house, her father is the Duke of Highmore, and their island is all about the sea. And so when one of the girls have died, they kind of push them back out to sea, and they become part of the salt again. So there's a big emphasis on that. So yeah, this was good, but there was a few things, like it went a little too far in a few areas for me. But it was definitely like, once I read the term fantasy thriller, I was like, oh, That's what I was reading, because it had those thriller vibes, because you were always worried that someone was going to be coming after Annalee or one of her remaining sisters, and there was some things going on that you thought somebody was. So I just wish I would have known kind of going in, so that my brain wasn't just a little bit confused the whole time. But I definitely want to read book 2. It's called House of Roots and Ruin. I think they're a duology. And then I'm going to know going into it what I'm reading, and that will help me a lot. So that's what I have currently finished, but like I said, I have a bunch of books on the go. So throughout the month, there should be quite a few books. Okay, I've only managed 2 books this time around, but that one's a chunker. So the first book I read, actually listened to once again while painting. This book got me through the rest of the painting, and it is The Love Note by Joanna Davidson Politano. Unfortunately, now I'm like 50-50 with her books. I've really enjoyed the first couple I read, and then haven't enjoyed the last couple. This one, okay, let me just tell you about it and then I'll tell you my thoughts. So our main character is Willa. She wants to be a surgeon, but this is 1865, so she's trying to get accepted into a school, but no one wants to accept her because she's a woman. So she has this, like, she makes this deal with her dad. She's going to take a 1-month nursing stint. If she can complete it successfully, he will, I can't remember what it was, he will let her apply to school. I can't remember exactly. If she fails, she will get married and marry the man of her father's choice. And then what happens is Willa discovers a love letter in a writing desk that she acquired a few years before from these people that are her father's patients. So she decides to go be a nurse at this manor. It's called Crestwick. That's where the desk is from. So she decides to go there to figure out the story of the love letter and see if she can deliver it to the person it's meant for. And she does, and it's just a comedy of errors in many ways. This love letter keeps getting left out, and people keep thinking the love letter's for them, and they think their spouse is cheating on them because they are getting a love letter from other people. And there are really good themes, like Joanna Davidson Politano, like this, I can't remember what the love letter says, but it just goes to show how everybody wants, okay, now I gotta find it. Everybody wants to hear that someone loves them, that someone is watching them and seeing. Okay, here's just a little bit of it. It says, "Dear one, I have no right to care for you, but it simply wasn't a choice. You inspired in me a passion both bright and deep when I wasn't looking, and I cannot help but feel you are a sort of clever thief. As I've watched your nature unfold, it leaves me breathless with wonder and profound respect for who you are, and involuntarily craving more of you." Like it goes on. "I even know that secret you hope to keep from everyone. Yes, I know all of it, and I choose you in spite of, or maybe because of, all of those things. I choose those unbelievable strengths, those weaknesses you try to hide, every bit of it because it's all you, and I choose you. Every day, every moment, I choose you." So that's like a little portion of this letter. And I do love the letter. Like, I would love to receive a letter like that. And I think I love some of the themes that come out of this book because of it. But I really don't like, it was all just one big misunderstanding kind of thing in books. And like, this is just one misunderstanding after another, after another, after another. And I cringe when I read that kind of thing. Plus, I was listening to this on audio, and I didn't really enjoy the narrator. And I don't know if it, because I was using the Hoopla app, I don't know if it was like the connection with Hoopla or what was going on, but it kept also cutting out a bit. So that definitely like lowered my enjoyment level. Also, I was painting all the doors in my basement, and that wasn't fun. That took so much longer than I expected. Yeah, so I think I gave this one 3 stars, and I'm gonna unhaul it after this month. Then I did read 11/22/63, all 842 pages or so. This is really the only Stephen King I'm interested in reading. I did buy It a long time ago, and then I've gotten rid of that. This one was intriguing to me because it was alternate history. It's like if you can go back in time and JFK is not assassinated. So it's interesting because I'm assuming this is like an actual bit of a newspaper. Then on the back here it's like JFK escapes assassination. So this is maybe what the newspaper could have looked like. So we follow this guy named Jake in 2011, I think. Actually, it's probably when this book was like written, present day-ish anyway. And he is told, he gets approached by this, let's gooch over here, this guy who works at a diner that Jake goes and visits often. This guy shows him like this rabbit hole where you can go back to 1958. You always go back to the same day, everything resets. And so this guy is dying and he wants Jake to go back to 1958, live the 5 years till 11/22/63, and kill or stop the guy who is going to assassinate JFK. And there's a lot of interesting things that happen. Jake wants to like actually see how changing something in the past can change things, so he goes and he changes something that's like relatively quick in history. So every time you go down this rabbit hole, it's only 2 minutes of real life have passed, but like you age. So if you're gone for 5 years, you'll come back 2 minutes later, but you'll be 5 years older. So yeah, so he goes and he changes something and comes back and sees how that changes things. And then he goes back and he tries to change what happened to JFK. That's where I'm gonna leave it. I don't want to spoil things. I mean, this book is over 800 pages long. By page 400, I was like, oh, okay, we got 400 more pages to go. It was too long in my opinion. Trigger warnings for everything under the sun. So much of how I feel about books is would I go into them. This book is also really heavy to hold. Would I go into them like thinking? And so because it's Stephen King, I was prepared for a bunch of stuff, so that didn't bother me as much as it could have. It's an interesting idea. I hated the ending. I can't say why without spoiling it, but okay. And then yeah, so I read like 400 pages. I skipped a few scenes, and then the last 400-ish pages I skimmed / read certain portions and then got to the end and then was disappointed. But this was my Read Your Bookshelf challenge and my Patron of the Month pick. Thankfully she was also underwhelmed by it. So many people told me they loved it, so then my expectations get high, and I can see why some people would like it. Like, it's interesting, but I feel like this has been done better before. Alternate history, I really enjoyed Wolf by Wolf and the follow-up Wolf by Wolf and Blood for Blood. I always get the titles all jumbled. Those were quite a bit better than this, in my opinion. Yeah, so I will also be unhauling this at the end of the month, but I'm so glad to have finished this. I'm so close to finishing the Pickwick Papers, so my giant 800+ page books for the month are almost done. And then I will probably have quite a few more books to wrap up now that I'm not getting bogged down by this. Also, a reason that I skimmed the last 400 pages is because I could feel myself getting into a reading slump, because I wasn't letting myself read any other physical books other than nonfiction and the Pickwick Papers, and it was stopping me from getting to some good books. So glad to be done. Glad I read it. I would have felt like I was missing something if I hadn't read it, but now that I've read it, I don't think I was missing anything. I don't think I would recommend it. I'll leave it at that. I made sure to be wearing a different shirt today since I apparently wore the same one twice. 2 updates in a row. Anyway, I finished 2 books, 2 very different sized books. I have had too many buddy reads or books I had to read this month. I finished the Pickwick Papers, which was a buddy read from January, February. I finished A Caribbean Mystery, which is my Agatha Christie of the month. I also had a homeschool book that I'm still reading. I had to read my Read Your Bookshelf Challenge book, which was also my Patreon book. And, oh, the Screwtape Letters, because I'm part of Krista's Lives. That's 5, like, absolutely have to read books, at least. I don't think I'm forgetting any. That doesn't include like the Buzzwordathon, and I'm realizing that's too much for me. I can't do that again. I know some people like Tiffany can have a million buddy reads and only then feel like she's doing too many. Apparently 5 is beyond what I prefer. Anyway, let's talk about the Pickwick Papers. Like I said, I read this January and February, and I finished it before the end of the month. I think we were supposed to finish it around the 25th-ish, based on we were reading a chapter a day. So I was reading this with Penny. She's often hanging out in the comments and is a real encourager, as well as Tiffany from Beautiful Minutia. They were actually going to read it, and I just tagged along, invited myself almost into their buddy read, so they were kind enough to let me join in. Yeah, this is the way to read Dickens. This is one of his first, okay, no, I can't remember. I think this is his first novel. It was serialized, and the buddy read was so good. The book, not so much. I think overall I gave the book 3 stars. The last 2 chapters, I loved those. If the rest of the book had been like that, that'd be great. But the book, I'm realizing, maybe this is a serialized issue. There were some chapters that didn't need to be there. If someone put this into a publisher's hands these days, I think whole chapters would just get chucked. There was no point to some of the chapters. So in this we follow Mr. Pickwick. He's like, we never are told an age. Elderly-ish, but not too elder. Like, maybe he's middle-aged. I don't really know. He's made out to be a little older than middle-aged, though, I think. He has this society, the Pickwickians, I think is what it's called, where he has these like younger guys that are underneath him, kind of part of the club, and they go to, I don't know, just on these adventures. But like, oh, they get into these like uncomfortable scrapes everywhere they go. Like, Mr. Pickwick he's not very good with people. Like, he's misunderstood, and then he never clarifies his issues. And yeah, this book was just kind of cringy. And then like there's a guy who says he's like this really good shot, and then he like shoots one of his friends by accident because he has no idea how the gun works. And then later in a different chapter they give him another gun. No. Yeah, anyway. I have lots of tabs. I'm glad I read it. It was one of the books that I have on my personal 50 classics I want to read before I die list. I'm glad I'm done, and I've decided that every January I'm going to start another Dickens book. And if I'm going to read it with someone, maybe read a chapter a day if the chapters are manageable, or just like start reading it in January and read it however long it takes me till I'm done. I think that's a good way to do it, because January I generally have like the least going on. It's cold. I like to be inside. I think that's my new method. So I got a lot out of this book, even though it wasn't really the book. The whole reason I wanted to read this book in the first place was because of Little Women. They kind of like briefly mentioned that they have a club like the Pickwicks, and I totally thought it was something different. Like, based on that little bit in Little Women, I was expecting something totally different than what I got. And I'm disappointed based on that niggling that I thought. So yeah, glad I read it, but glad I'm done and don't plan on ever rereading it. And then I read A Caribbean Mystery. This is my Agatha Christie for the month, so I'm doing a separate video on this each month over on my Patreon, the book that we're reading together. I'm creating a video for them, as well as we're going to be doing a discussion on a couple books at a time. Anyway, so this one we follow Miss Marple, and I was so excited when I read this, started reading it, because Miss Marple, she's hanging out there on paragraph 2. Old Miss Marple inclined her head. Some Miss Marple stories, she doesn't come in until like way later in the book. This one, she's all the way through, so I love that. Here she's on vacation in the Caribbean, and she's talking to a guy one day, and he's talking about how he knows like someone that knows someone that, like, there was all these different murders. Like, he has a bunch of murder stories, and he's pulling a picture out of his wallet to show Miss Marple. He was like, do you want to see a picture of a murderer? And he was going to show her, and then something came over his face, and Miss Marple suspects he saw the murderer behind her. And the whole book she's trying to figure out who the murderer was, because that night that old man dies. And so she's like, he's been murdered. Who murdered him? Like, who did he recognize? And that snapshot is missing, so she can't just like go look at this picture that's in his wallet. Yeah, and so I enjoyed it. I think I gave it 4 stars. I love that Miss Marple was all the way through. I did enjoy that she was on holiday, although I love her in England as well. This cover actually makes sense by the time that you get to the end. I finally like put the pieces together. It's a little creepy, but overall I enjoyed the story, so I'm glad that I read this one. It's so unique. I kind of want to just display this on my shelf like this. So I still have a couple more books to finish and maybe some more to start and finish. We'll see how many I can get done by the end of the month. Okay guys, I've been flying through books left and right, and I don't ever film in the evening. Well, I barely ever film in the evenings. I never film with a light. It's a little distracting, but I'm doing it tonight. So what I've been reading since my last clip was finishing some amazing books and then DNFing a bunch of books and then just ingesting tons of books. So I'm going to start with my DNFs because those are less fun to talk about. And then I'm going to talk about some of the books that I've read, and then I'm probably going to hop on again at the end of the month and share the rest of the books because like there's kind of too many books to talk about. I've been doing a lot of housework, so I've been listening to a lot of audiobooks and quitting a bunch of books. So I did share a couple of stories on Instagram earlier this week because I ended up quitting a bunch of books in one day, which when I do that, I'm like, is this me or is it the books? So the first one I quit was Nothing Else But Miracles by Kate Albus. She's the one that wrote A Place to Hang the Moon, so I was really looking forward to this because that is like one of my favorite middle grade books, and I didn't get very far. I can't remember how far. And then, well, it was in this section, so like probably, yeah, about 40-ish pages, and I wasn't really liking our main character. So it's like set during World War II. And then this other character swore, like he used the Lord's name in vain in a, I called it an unnecessary way on Instagram. I don't think it's ever necessary, but I feel like there are instances where I can understand it more, and this was just like not called for at all. And I have such a low tolerance for that in middle grade, especially when it's historical. So I quit this one. Then I went on to start, oh, I forget the title of the book, so I'll put up the picture. This is a middle grade that kind of has Anne of Green Gables vibes, but is fantasy, and I didn't mind it. This one's like a soft DNF. I may continue it at some other time, but I don't own the book. I wasn't super invested, and I was just feeling like I wanted to get through some of the books that I do own, so I quit that one. Then I started listening to Queen of Hearts, and I'm not a really big Alice in Wonderland person, so this is some kind of like it's set in Wonderland, and I really wasn't enjoying our main character in here either, so I decided to quit this. And all three of these that I put on Instagram, people said it wasn't worth continuing, so I feel good about that. Plus, the more books I can DNF, the less I have to move. Like, I don't want to not like books, but it has its benefits. Then I got decently far into Winter, White and Wicked, and I quit this one as well, mostly because I was very confused by the whole magic system. So our main character is Sylvie. Oh no, like there's so many things I was confused about. She grew up with this girl named Lenore, I think. They were living with Lenore's grandfather. So Sylvie's parents died, and then I think Lenore's grandfather eventually died. And Sylvie drives truck in the mountains. It's like eternally winter here. And Lenore is gone. And I think, well, yeah, Sylvie wants to go save her, but I never understood why Lenore was in trouble. Like, I didn't care about her mission. And then I struggled with understanding, like, not the magic system, but like the folklore around this world. So I just didn't understand what was going on. And I actually got quite far. I feel like I was almost halfway through. And then I was just like, you know what? I'm not caring. So why do I continue? So I quit this book. I think that was all for my DNFs. But I have like a ton of good books to talk about now. I guess I won't talk about them in any particular order because I did read one on my Kindle. Dear Henry, Love Edith. A lot of people talked about that book. It showed up like twice in my Christian fiction collab video that I did, so I wanted to give it a try. Plus, it has like You've Got Mail vibes. So this is a story where Henry and Edith end up kind of being roommates through kind of a chain of events, but they have different schedules, so they never actually meet each other. They both think that they're like older people, but they're both like 30-ish. And it is a rom-com, not normally my thing, but if you're gonna throw in like You've Got Mail stuff, I'm totally down for that. But it is much more comedy than romance. Like, yeah, it does have some romance, but like I was laughing out loud so many times, like highlighting scenes and like banter that I loved, and it was enjoyable. Definitely not my norm, but I had a lot of fun with it. And I know she's coming out with another book next month, I think, maybe, Becca Kinzer, and I'm like tempted to try it, but I'm not sure if it will like live up, and I don't really want to read a ton of rom-coms, but it was fun. It was a fun read, and I'm glad lots of people recommended it, so I gave it a try. Another book that I loved that I finished is Raising Worry-Free Girls. So this I read for a book club over on my homeschool membership. I did a whole video talking about the different sections, so I'm not gonna like elaborate too much here, but the subtitle is Helping Your Daughter Feel Braver, Stronger, and Smarter in an Anxious World. So I bought this book plus Brave, a teen girl's guide to beating worry and anxiety, and I would highly recommend this one, and my daughter highly recommends the teen one. Lots of like practical tips and inspiration and verses and just pretty much everything you need if your kid is anxious. And I would suggest not waiting until your daughter is a teen like I did, and researching this now, earlier if you can. Yeah, highly recommend it. Lots of strategies that I'm implementing. I also finished the Screwtape Letters. As of filming this, tomorrow night is the last day of February, and we're gonna be doing our last/second live on this. So this was Krista's Christian read-along book for February. This is my third time reading through the Screwtape Letters by C.S. Lewis, and this is like a head demon writing to his nephew, giving him tips and tricks on how to get his like human, or I can't remember what the word was that they use for it, the human that he's been assigned to who's just become a Christian, to fall away. Like all these different ways to get him to doubt Christianity and Christians and different things. And it is so eye-opening. This was written in 1942, which is like over 80 years ago, and so many of these things are so applicable now and in my life. Like I feel like C.S. Lewis could have written this now. There is like a few chapters on war, not so applicable to me, but like I highlighted so many things. So we have, by the time this is out, there will be 2 lives over on Krista's channel talking about this. So if you want to hear more in-depth thoughts, that will be there. So many good points in here. And I will say though, it is a bit confusing because when Screwtape is writing, he says the enemy, but that's actually God. And when he says our Father, that's Satan. So like my head, I'm always like, okay, who's who here? Like what are we doing? So it takes a little bit of brain power, but I enjoy it. Also, this was the annotated edition, which just has like references to other things, other books that Lewis wrote, or where references are coming from. I didn't read all of the annotations because there's quite a lot, but the ones I did read were good, and it also just inspired me to keep reading Lewis's books, which is good because I want to read a bunch more this year. Okay, continuing along, a book that I loved so much is Clock Tower Bound. I own the physical copy, but I mostly read the ebook, so I need to go back and tab all the highlights that I highlighted in the ebook because it only looks like I have 2, but there's a lot more to come. So this is book 2 in the Bookstrings series. Also, my brain, for some reason, I kept like mixing up, being confused if it was Clock Tower Bound or Clock Bound Tower. Sometimes my brain does this, and it's like so hard to switch it. So if I'm saying it incorrectly ever, it's because my brain is confused. Okay. So the series, what's happening in the series is this man named Milton helps businesses / specifically bookstores in the series that are struggling to grow their business. And he gives different ideas and suggestions, and we're always set in a bookstore. This one had like all the vibes, So our main character, her name is Cezanne, but she goes by Anne, and she's very much inspired by Anne of Green Gables and Darling Desi. If you watch Darling Desi online, like Shatona obviously used her as inspiration, and she mentions Darling Desi in here. And Anne wants to just, I don't know, she doesn't want to. She does a really good job like romanticizing her life, which I shared about in a video over on my personal channel, how that's something I want to do more of. Not in a just desiring something else, but like embracing what is already around me kind of way. So we've got Anne of Green Gables-esque, we've got Darling Desi, we've got romanticizing life, there's You've Got Mail quotes, there's she talks about my daughter's book in here. Like, I mean, I knew it was coming, but I almost cried when it came. Not only does it mention the book, it mentions her by name, and that's just amazing. Also, there's lots of booktube references because Shatona has a booktube channel, watches booktube. This was so perfect. Like, I love the vibes, I love her humor, her depth. She writes Christian fiction in a deeper way than I think anybody that I've read, anybody that I can remember. So yeah, so Anne and her ex-best friend used to have a bookstore together. They have a falling out, and then Anne starts a bookstore across the street. So there is this like underlying tension of this misunderstanding blow up thing that happened, which is something that I don't often like in books. Often if something like that is going to happen, I'm just like, just talk and get it out. But they kind of have prior to this book, and things are still tense, and I really like how she resolved it, how she took a trope, I don't know if that's really a trope, that I normally don't really like, and turned it into something so deep. Yeah, this is by far my best, like, or my favorite out of this series. It says it's book 2, but then there's also 2 novellas ahead of it, and I think I've given them all 5 stars, but this one's like my favorite of the 5 stars, if that makes sense. Okay, the last one I'm gonna rave about now. I feel like I'm missing a book though, but that's okay. I'm gonna do another wrap up. The Light Between Worlds. This book, I kind of knew it was going to be amazing because Karina from What Brings Karina Joy, which she told me she was maybe going to start back her channel this year, and she hasn't yet. Hopefully she does. She gave it 5 stars, and that's why I bought it off of Book Outlet in the phone, and it blew me away. So how do I explain this? It's like Narnia-esque. So we start off in the 1940s, World War II. 3 siblings are going to a bomb shelter. They're waiting for their parents to arrive so they can close the door, and suddenly they're transported into woodlands, and they end up staying in these woodlands for 6 years and helping the people and creatures of the woodlands out, and then they come back to England, and they're there in that bomb shelter 6 years prior, in a way. Like, the main character, her name Evelyn, she was 11, aged 6 years, was 17, and then went back to 11. Like, that's gotta mess with a person. And she loved the woodlands. Her other siblings maybe not as much. And when Evelyn gets back, she ends up getting very depressed, and she felt like she belonged in the woodlands, and she does not belong in England or in this world. And so every chapter flips back and forth between like present day with Evelyn, and then time in the woodlands, and until about like halfway through, and then things change a bit. But Evelyn is the most depressed and melancholy character I've ever read about. This book is heavy, but I don't think I've really ever read a book about a character that is depressed that doesn't come across as really self-centered. Like, I think it's a fine line, and I can't imagine writing it, but this was so well done. Like, my heart was breaking for her, and yeah. So lots happens. The only issue I had is I was listening to the book, and it took me a while, because every other chapter switches between present day and in the woodlands. It took me a while to be like, okay, where are we in this chapter? I wish for books like this there would be a heading on the top of the chapter. If you're reading it physically, it's fine because the Woodlands chapters are italicized and the non-Woodland ones aren't. But when you're listening, you can't tell that. So that was my only complaint. I listened to most of it, read I think the last 8%. Definitely going to reread this one, and I can't believe, I don't know, maybe I missed out. Like, when did this book come out? I can't believe Karina's the only person I've ever heard talk about it. 2018. So maybe I missed the train. But if you haven't read this and you like fantasy, but it's not really even just fantasy because it's only some chapters, and even then there's not a whole lot of fantasy other than the fact that they kind of like teleported to a different world. This one surprised me a lot. Okay, so either I forgot a book or I might finish a book. I definitely have to come back on and finish this up. We'll see if I get any more books read in the next 24 hours. So I have 3 more books to add to my list for the month, 2 of which are DNFs. I started Luck of the Titanic, and I don't know, guys, maybe I've been in a bit of a reading funk. I'm not sure. It just wasn't grabbing my attention. So this is about a young woman named Valora Luck, who sneaks aboard the Titanic. She is half Chinese, and she goes on there because her brother is one of the passengers, and she wants her brother to become like a circus act with her because they have always been into acrobatics and stuff. And I don't know. I have no idea where the book's gonna go. I didn't read super far, I didn't think. And I just kind of didn't care. If someone were to convince me at some point that this book was really good and is worth finishing, I would do that. At this point though, I wasn't interested. My next DNF does not surprise me. It has lots of pictures. It is middle grade. It's A Wolf Called Wander. Now, lots of people did tell me that they like this book. I see like lots of illustrations throughout the pages. My problem is this book is written from the viewpoint of our wolf, and I just don't. Oh yeah, no, I think it's all from the viewpoint of the wolf. I didn't get very far. I don't like first-person animal perspectives. I don't really like animal perspectives at all, but I really didn't enjoy this, and so this is based on a true story. It still doesn't help. I'm still just not interested. And then the last one, I actually finished this one today, which is March 1st, but it's a library book, so I want to return it as soon as possible. So I'm going to tack this on here. Spy Family, volume 10. So obviously this is the 10th volume. It's hard to say anything. I loved spending time with the Forger family. Anya is just adorable. So if you guys don't know the premise of this, it is a manga series where we have a spy who goes by the name of Lloyd. His code name is Twilight. We don't know what his real name is. He has this mission, but he needs a wife and a child. So unbeknownst to him, he actually marries a woman who's an assassin, and they adopt this girl who's actually a telepath. And yeah, then things just unfold. We started out actually getting a little bit of Lloyd's personal background from when he was a kid, and then Anya only comes in halfway through, so a little bit of a complaint there because she's adorable and she's a telepath, but she's only like 5 or 6. She's really young. She's smart because she can hear people's thoughts, but she's also like not very smart. Like, she's still a little kid. So there's some funny scenes. And yeah, I don't know. This one, some of them are a little bit graphic because our assassin she's a little vicious. She's also quite blonde in personality, which is a little funny at times. But this one had none of that. It does start out with a bit of a war, but I didn't feel like it was as gory as some of them can be. But I'm still thoroughly enjoying this series, and I know you can read them online and read them sooner. It should come as no surprise that I'm waiting till the physical copies get to my library and reading them. So I'm just enjoying the ride. And that is all for my February wrap up here. I'm curious to hear if you guys liked any of the books that I DNF'd. Should I give them another try? And also curious to hear what your favorite book from February was. Thanks so much for joining me today, guys.